Okay, so I think we should talk a little bit about the Ukraine-Russia situation, or at least as it stands. For anyone watching this, this is being recorded on the 1st of June, 2025, and that does matter because events are moving so quickly that even if we put this out in the next day or two, things will have moved on. And if you're watching this a week or two or a month from now, I'm sure it will have moved on. So it's a little bit of a moment in time update. So yeah, it just needs to be talked about, I think, because it's one of the biggest things in the world at the moment. I mean, I suppose one of the first places to kick off is that Donald Trump did say publicly on camera more than once before he got into the White House for the second time.
I know what you're going to say.
That he could stop this conflict in one day, within 24 hours, that he had a great relationship with both Putin and Zelensky. He could get them round the table. He could basically lay down the law to them in terms of money and politics and influence and all sorts of ways. And that he would have the political clout to just bring it to a close ASAP. Well, that just simply hasn't happened. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon now. Again, could be proven very wrong. This is being recorded on the 1st of June. It could all be over in 4 days flat, or 4 years from now it's still going on. We don't know. But it doesn't look like the United States, Donald Trump, the State Department, the Pentagon have got the leverage to force Putin to stop. All the this is my view of it. All the momentum, all the balls are in the Kremlin's court now. They have won on the battlefield. When you look at various,
we're going to get accused of Russian propagandas again.
Well, who cares? Been accused of that for years already. Well, just to quickly say, I'm chagrined.
I know, prerequisites. Yeah, no, we're not. We don't like Russia, blah, blah, blah.
I'm not a fan of Russia. I'm not in their pay. I do think Putin is a murderous killer. He does murder journalists and his political opponents. And the threat of the Russian Air Force buzzing UK airspace is terrible and despicable. And it is a worry that they've got a massive nuclear arsenal. Okay, all that out of the way. The
reality. What is the actual reality? Right.
I also don't think. Sorry.
I was going to say the reality. The actual reality is that they've effectively won. That is the reality of the situation.
Right. I also don't buy. This is probably where some ultra pro-Ukrainian people do get pissed off with me, when I have always said, and I still maintain, that I don't buy the narrative that Putin wants to invade Belarus, Poland, Estonia.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I don't buy that. I don't think he does. When he says he does, I believe him.
Yeah, I mean, could be proven completely wrong. Who knows?
True,
you know,
could be.
Like I've said previously, is that we fundamentally don't understand these cultures, right? So maybe he does. Who knows? On face value, it would seem a little bit absurd that is the route that he would go down, in my eyes anyway. I'm sure you probably think very similar. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but yeah, it's one of those things as well. Just saying that they basically won it, it's not endorsing it. It's not saying, yeah, we're glad he's won. It's not, but it's the reality of the situation, right? Unless the UK, the USA, all of Europe actively get involved, you know, not proxy, not tangentially, but they actively get involved, Russia's basically won.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even that scenario again fails to take into account Russia's giant nuclear arsenal. If Russia wanted to nuke Berlin and Paris and London, they could. I mean, I don't think they would in a million years, but nonetheless, there's this. Okay, so one point you made, it's difficult to really understand the Russian mind. Absolutely. People have been saying that since the 18th century. And it's true. You can't understand what it means to be Russian unless you were born and raised in it. Right.
The magic soil doesn't exist, so you can't just turn up and go, I'm Russian now. I understand your shared ancestral history.
And I won't, but I could go off on a tangent here without exaggeration for a few hours talking about the history of Russia and the bit of land that today we call Ukraine. In fact, on lotuseaters.com, on the behind the paywall there's an episode where I talk with a great, very, very interesting YouTuber, Apostolic Majesty, a true genius, where we go back to the 8th century. And we talk about the Kievan Rus, and we talk about the Grand Dukes of Muscovy, and we talk about everything that's gone on between the power that we now call Russia and the power that we now call Ukraine. I mean, even the 20th century story between the Bolsheviks and Ukrainian nationalists, that alone we could talk for hours about, hours and hours. Just what happened with the Nazis and the Soviets going back and forth across Ukraine, the battles for Kiev during World War II. Could talk for ages about this. So it's just the Holodomor, right? That one thing. Many, many, many books written about it. So, okay, the relationship between Moscow and Kiev is an extremely complicated and extremely storied one. Okay, now from the Russian point of view, in some ways, Kiev is as Russian as it gets. Like that whole part of the world we call Ukraine, certainly Eastern Ukraine, is considered a heartland of Russia. Right? It's super Russian to many Russian people. Their thinking is that Kiev is one of the many seats of Russian heritage and history. You've got sort of Novgorod in the north, or you've got St. Petersburg or Leningrad, St. Petersburg, it's all the same place up in the north. Moscow, Kiev, these are Russian. They're as Russian as they could be. Okay. So, but then you've got the concept of Ukraine. Okay. That's something else. Also steeped in history, steeped in centuries and centuries of history. Again, you would have to go back to the Kievan Rus to start to 1,000 years more ago to start to untangle this. Okay, so having said that, I would like to talk for hours and hours, but I've already done it once. Maybe I'll do it again, actually.
What's the update? What's the very latest at time of recording? 1st of June. What has actually happened? What's the status quo currently?
In the last few hours, last 24 hours or so, Ukraine unleashed some sort of mass drone attack on
this is new to me.
some Russian bombers, heavy bombers, on the ground in Russian airfields.
Is this?
But this comes. Sorry, very quick to say this comes a week after last weekend. There were giant airstrikes on Kiev by the Russians. So, in other words, we're still deep in a hot war. There's still hot war going on, very much so. But when you look at the map in terms of territorial gains, the Russians have won. They've taken everything in Eastern Ukraine that they want. The Ukrainians tried a counteroffensive around the Kursk region, got completely their asses handed to them, essentially, completely booted out of there. You know, if Hitler's Wehrmacht in 1943 couldn't get anywhere near Kursk, Zelensky's Ukrainian army is not going to stand a chance. So that's where we are.
So I was going to say, the weaponry that Ukraine used, because this sounds like it immediately follows the last update I had, because this thing's been going on for so long now. I don't even really care to look at the updates nowadays, because I not as frequently. I try to look more long range, updates periodically. But one of the updates that I looked at in the last couple of days was that Western leaders had given Ukraine the go-ahead for long-range weaponry. So is that does that sound like what they've done there?
I don't think that's what it is. From what I saw recently, today rather, that they were using drones. It was a drone thing rather than long-range missiles.
Okay.
But nonetheless, both are using missiles. I mean, both are using assassination tactics. It's pretty brutal, but it's still a limited war. Because once again, Russia, the Kremlin, could just nuke the Ukraine if they wanted to. I mean, it's not in their interest to. They become an international pariah, and it's a terrible thing to do. And I don't think they've got any intention of doing that. But once again, they could probably assassinate Zelensky if they wanted to. It seems to me they've made a conscious decision not to. So it is a limited war in all sorts of ways, right? Again, Russia could go on a total war footing, like it's World War II, like gear their entire economy to pumping out endless tanks and artillery pieces and fighter jets, and swamp the whole of Ukraine and invade Kiev and occupy Kiev. They've obviously made the decision not to do that. So it is still a limited war. But in terms of that eastern part of the Ukraine, that they've taken it, they've occupied it, and the Crimea, and any counter offensives the Ukrainians have tried, despite the fantastic amounts of money and materiel and help they've been given by the US, at least the Biden administration, and Europe, despite all of that, their counteroffensives have come to nothing, essentially. So, as you say, it doesn't make me pro-Putin, doesn't make me a cheerleader from the Kremlin.
You're not endorsing it, you're observing it.
Yeah, to say that the reality on the battlefield is a Russian victory. So,
that sound like.
The only thing left to happen is for a ceasefire or an actual full peace to be agreed. Now, you can only imagine in Putin's mind, from the Russian point of view, is that now they're only going to accept everything they want. There's no reason for them to make any concessions. They've won on the battlefield. There's no real question on any level that the Ukrainians can take the war to the Russians to an extent that they will have to retreat from eastern Ukraine. So there's no reason for Russia or Putin to, at the peace table, to accept anything short of exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's not. The agreement is a ceasefire fully. Well, it's effectively Ukraine has to admit defeat for there to be a ceasefire, right? It's Ukraine puts up the white flag and says, we surrender, we accept this is a surrender. You have won in that regard. That's the only way it's going to, again, that's just the reality of the situation. Again, it's not endorsing it. It's observing the realistic scenario ahead there. Why would Putin accept? Why would he accept? Oh, well, we want this back. He's going to go, well, no, obviously not. I've got it. And I took it from you. So no, like what are you going to do? Nothing. You haven't been able to do anything. No. These are the demands. You must meet them effectively.
Right. It's about making any sort of deal is about leverage, isn't it? A bit, or even just like imagine you're playing poker when you're chip leader, you can bully the other people around the card table. I'm chip leader. If you want to even start to think about playing with me, you've got to put a shitload of chips in because I can afford to do it. Like, do you want to play this game? Okay, so leverage. It's always about leverage, right? And the Ukrainians haven't got any leverage, really.
It's a seller's market, not a buyer's.
Right. That's another way of putting it. So, the Ukrainians essentially have to kind of do one of two things: accept defeat, accept that they've lost the Crimea and that eastern part of their country, or continue the war indefinitely, chewing through a generation of their menfolk.
Well, they've already done that, haven't they, really?
Well,
but
yeah.
Isn't that something which Zelensky has said time and time again, is that it's part of our constitution? I physically cannot surrender. It's like, well, change your fucking constitution then, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
If you physically can't surrender and you're just going to, hundreds of thousands of young men are just going to die because of it, that's a really dumb constitution. When you could draw it to it, and I know people would go, well, it's a sense of pride, and if we let them do this and blah blah blah. Yeah, I get it. But let's just play devil's advocate and say that if they changed the constitution, he surrendered, it stopped the murders, and they could coexist. Let's just say that's the case. Let's say that's a possibility. That's a pretty good outcome, all things considered, as opposed to more death, more bloodshed, more people being bombed to oblivion with drones. The most awful, heartless, savage way to die. The most inhumane way of war, of enacting war against one another. I think it's a brutal way humanity has progressed. Humanity has progressed so far that the most inhumane way we fight now is with drones. Ugh, gross.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I've heard Zelensky say that no, it's part of my oath of office to say that I will not surrender land to foreign aggressors. And in sort of in an ideal world, that sort of makes sense. Yeah, that's what you would want your leader to swear. But then you get into realpolitik. Then we get into battlefield reality, though. So you're going to you're just going to prolong a war endlessly then. Well, you have to amend the constitution, or just simply act unconstitutionally, or allow a new government to come in that is elected on a ticket of coming to the peace table in an unconstitutional manner from the Ukrainian point of view. I don't know. The Ukrainian government, whether led by Zelensky or whoever comes next, is in a difficult situation, an extremely difficult situation. I mean, okay, fine, but what it's that or perma war that you cannot win. I mentioned it somewhere else, maybe on Lotus Eaters, but there's this idea going back to the ancient world that don't fight a fight that you can't win. Okay, from Sun Tzu through to von Clausewitz. You don't start a fight unless you've at least sort of 75-80% sure you can win. Ideally,
I know where you mentioned that.
Sorry,
I know where you mentioned that.
When what was
recently? It? We're having beers and we're having a conversation. Yeah. That's when you mentioned that.
I think I'm repeating it for the third time, because I think I did say it on the podcast of the Lotus Eaters.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, okay. This is just a talking point for you now.
Just something I repeat all the time now, it seems. No, yeah. I mean, ideally, you want overwhelming odds. You want 5. You want to outnumber your enemy 5-1, 10-1, 20-1. At the very, very lowest. At the very, very lowest, you want a sort of a 75% chance of winning. Anything less than that, it's not a good idea to either start the war or continue it. And now, Ukraine have not done. They're not there. They can't do it. So Russia can make so many more artillery shells. Their air force is so much more powerful. Their ability to have manufacture tanks is better. Their research and development is better. Their population is bigger. It goes on and on and on. The Ukrainians on the battlefield are outclassed and beaten. So then it just comes to, you've got to come to the peace table, even if it's humiliating. But right now, anyway, again, as of the 1st of June 2025, doesn't look like it's happening. Trump has tried his best, certainly, hasn't he, to bring them together. There was some sort of summit in Saudi Arabia. There was one in Turkey. He had Zelensky over to the White House. Apparently, he's been on the phone to Putin a number of times. They've had dialogue through the media through Twitter or Truth Social, all sorts of stuff. It just, Putin knows how strong his hand is at this moment.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to do what Trump asks him to do. He doesn't have to. That's the reality here.
This isn't a gentleman's war, right? You know, this isn't a I don't know, like it's not lawyers discussing what, you know, what's legal and what's not. When people are like, oh, it's an illegal war. Yeah, no one cares, mate. No one cares. What constitutes a legal war? It's just perspective at the end of the day. Putin believes that he is well within his rights to do what he's doing, regardless of what we think. He's not going to listen. He's not listen. He hasn't listened. He's not going to listen. He has the upper hand. It's just, that's the reality of the situation.
Putin doesn't care that somebody like Rachel Maddow or Anne Applebaum or Christian Murphy or Keir Starmer or Donald Trump or Marco Rubio, he doesn't care that they're sort of wagging their finger. Naughty Mr. Putin, you must stop this aggression. You must stop this war immediately. He's like, no thanks. Next. Yeah. Anything else? No, well, I'm chip leader here. I'm chip leader. So no, thanks. Anything else?
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing, is that it's all well and good. So the same people that go, well, you're acknowledging that Russia's winning, therefore you must be pro Russia and completely ignore everything that they do that's horrendous and all the atrocities. No, wait, stop.
Yeah.
You are ignoring the atrocities that Putin has engaged in by believing Putin will just stop when asked. No, look at his history, track record of brutalities and murdering people that are in opposition, and, you know, imprisoning people, starving them to death. People that comment on the reality of the situation acknowledge all of that. They're aware of it. The people that think that Putin will just stop or should just stop when asked, you're the ones that are blind to this situation. You're the ones willfully ignorant to what he's done, because someone like that doesn't give a shit about people going, no, stop, Putin, stop, you better stop, no.
Yeah.
He's murdered his opposition. He doesn't care.
Someone like David Lammy trying to pour moral scorn on Vladimir Putin. It's a joke. It's a joke. He's got an army, a successful battlefield, combat-ready army in the field, and a massive nuclear arsenal. And the people behind him, largely in Russia. So he doesn't care what the Foreign and Commonwealth Office says. Doesn't care what the State Department says.
Well, his point will be, what are you going to do?
And absolutely. And that doesn't make me pro-Putin. I'm not. I mean, remember Alexander Litvinenko, remember the Novichok stuff. As I said earlier, the Russians buzz our airspace to this day.
Yeah.
Like the way the espionage war the Russians launched against us in the Cold War was insane. And to this day, there's all sorts of skullduggery and counter espionage going on between the UK and the Russians. They're absolutely one of our strategic enemies. Absolutely. And so I'm not. Putin is a murderer. It's as simple as that. He does murder people that get in his way. So I'm not a fan of him. I'm not playing defense on his behalf. I'm not a cheerleader for him. I'm saying the reality is he's chip leader here. He doesn't need to listen to David Lammy or Marco Rubio.
No.
Zelensky's got no leverage. Okay, so what, you're just going to have an endless war? Is that what it is? Is that what's going to happen now? It's just endless, is it? Well, I hope not. I hope not. Enough innocent Ukrainians and Russians have died in this thing. I would love to see it end tomorrow. I would love it.